Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What incident at your job made you so mad that you left it without any notice? Part 2. Oh yeah. I work as an HVAC technician, had enrolled in a full-time program, and was looking for a part-time job, incredibly difficult to locate in my field of work. As a requirement for hiring, they typically ask that you have a gung-ho attitude toward working 84-hour work weeks indefinitely. I quickly discovered that the reason behind their willingness to hire me after I found one willing to work part-time hours. When I first joined them, I discovered that the husband and wife had inherited the business from the husband's late cousin, and they had rapidly lost all of their technicians. Terribly unorganized. They were still conducting 95% of their business on paper rather than with computer software, which meant they were frequently forgetting and losing work orders, tools, and other items. Every other week for the 2 months I was employed by them, they hired a new worker, and every one of them left after 3 days. Before being hired, I only had a 5-minute conversation rather than an actual interview. They had no idea what I could or could not do. They said that their staff members were pilfering. They were so negative about almost every one of their former employees that it gave me a preview of what I was in for. It seems that if you left for any reason, the next person they hired would find out that you were a thief, which, ironically, is what all of their former employees were. I tried to ignore it, which is how I managed to survive longer. I initially wrote it off, thinking that perhaps they had a difficult time and were suffering from PTSD as a result of poor hiring. At the same time, it tired me out. I was having a pretty bad day around the 2-month mark. That morning, over a tool in question, the owner got into a random and extremely unprofessional argument with me. It was obvious that he had not grown up to be a business owner. I didn't hesitate to pull him aside and tell him that wasn't acceptable for us to communicate. As a veteran, I always deal with people directly, as I was trained to do. By day's end, I get a call from his wife, who's accusing me of stealing yet another tool. 5 minutes later, she calls me again to tell me she's found it, so don't worry. Not a regret. Just know that we do no longer hold grudges against you. I had heard this about a dozen times in the short time I was there, so I guess it was the feather that broke the camel's back. When I got back from work, I told her we had to talk. I just left everything work-related in their office because they were gone for the day and the office was locked when I returned. I left the work van in a better state than when I found it by giving it a wash and a vacuum. I emailed them and never heard from them again. Didn't feel great because at first I've always given at least 4 weeks notice, but I also didn't regret it at all. I've quit 2 jobs on the spot in my HVAC career so far. My first job was for 7 years at a family-run business. Before the 3rd-generation son assumed power and became president, everything was excellent overall. Things quickly deteriorated. Changes were causing all of our competent service technicians to disappear like flies. The mood was really gloomy. It soon became more about how much money we could make than about showing concern for our workers. They were bringing on new hires with little to no experience and training them improperly when it came to using equipment. Out of the 3 remaining OG technicians, one of us was promoted to field service supervisor and given the responsibility of managing all the new hires. It was always his fault when the new guys made mistakes, which happened a lot. After 2 months, he left because he was unable to watch everyone at once. They drew me in and attempted to elevate me to the role. I questioned why, explaining that many adjustments must be made as well as appropriate training for them to perform tasks correctly. The president informed me, quote, "That won't happen and here's why. I much prefer people like you and X, the guy who just left, who are passionate, articulate, and do things correctly and cleanly, but who be and complain and question how I handle things. They also rush to get everything done. So basically, after giving you years of dedication, hard work, time away from my family, I was already working 60-plus hour weeks for years, willfulness and passion for what I do, don't value me as an employee?" I asked. "And you would rather have people who don't care and or could potentially injure themselves or others by their inexperience?" This was the question I posed. He replied yes, adding that any of the new guys could take my place at any time. I then said, "I see where I stand at this company, and I don't want to be a part of it. I'm going to find a place where my dedication and experience are valued. Wishing you luck." That day I departed. Second employment, the owner/boss of the small commercial HVAC company I worked for, which was doing a lot of shady business I didn't know at first, was rarely around and couldn't be bothered with his frequent golf outings and vacations. Employee morale and tech retention were at an all-time low, with people leaving like flies. As one of the 3 office employees, I was forced to make many important and executive decisions for the company, none of which my boss approved of when he learned about them. I signed an NDA after finding out about the dubious activities that took place behind closed doors. I knew at this point that I was running out of time here, so that was a strike. I once hurt my shoulder while working with a few technicians, and because I made his worker comp rates go up, I received terrible treatment from my employer. This was strike 2. The owner squashed everything I tried to do to keep technicians happy as I was working to improve the business and boost morale. The company was already in financial trouble when I took this job. I was so aggravated that one day I sent 2 guys to do an emergency sewer jet job for a business building whose sewage was backing up and flooding. I offered to go help since one of the technicians had called in sick, so I spent the entire time working half in the field and half in the office. The owner tries to get me to come in for a preventative maintenance call for another company while I load the machine and all of its gear onto the truck and trailer. I politely explained that I wouldn't be going to the PM call at that time and would schedule it for later in the week because we were busy and an emergency sewer cleaning/clearing was much more important than the call he was pulling me for. I asked, "Is that so?" The owner told me over the phone that "I effing own you, I sign your effing paychecks, and you do what I'm told." I'm tired of supporting this company for you. Nobody owns me, so screw you and it. Quit that instant, blocked his number, and hung up. I was angry at the moment, even though it probably wasn't the best thing for me to do. Nobody is the owner of another person. Somehow they're staying afloat barely, with an entirely new staff that knows nothing of the shadiness or S-business/side business practices that they have going on there. I currently work for a different small business owned by my best friend's father. I'm in a much better place now. Was driven to a mental breakdown by having half a dozen bosses, no training resources, and a controller who made impossible demands and refused to listen when told why we did things the way we did. We spent 4 months planning and carrying out a task for which we did not have the right tools, even after explaining the issue with their demands several times. As expected, it turned into a huge mess. When I told them I was quitting, they wanted to see how I was doing the work so they could give it to someone else. The look on their face was priceless. I should have just used the API tool in our inventory software. They told me I was a fool. I told them again that it didn't exist. They tried to show me. It turned out that the company didn't want to spend much money, so they didn't buy that part of the software. They also realized all of a sudden, even though I had told them several times, that they had given me an impossible task, having priceless to just throw the colossal pile of S I had barely been holding together on their desk on my way out. Homeowner, share your story of encountering a moronic neighbor or HOA, Part 2. A homeowners association was proposed by some individuals in order to protect our investments, even though our first home was not. The woman in charge of the effort couldn't sell their previous home because she had constructed a huge house that didn't fit in with the neighborhood. Since our state does not require all properties to join and you cannot be forced to join at any time, we have always declined to join. HOAs are allowed to be formed. Because we refused to allow them to put a neighborhood sign in our yard, and because we had a terrible-looking plain wooden privacy fence at the neighborhood entrance, the HOA detested us. Their requirements included nothing less than a cedar plank privacy fence, which would have cost roughly 4 times as much as ours. Along with non-members, we would be removed from the garage sales map in our neighborhood. We didn't care that we weren't invited to the neighborhood get-togethers. Our realtor made sure to include the phrase, "not part of the HOA" at the top of the listing when we sold. She also gave everyone who glanced at the house the guidelines regarding not being coerced into joining. She refused to take it down when the HOA president tried to persuade her to. The couple who bought the house didn't join the HOA because they shared our anti-HOA sentiments. However, our former neighbor claims that they sold to another young family that was conned into joining the HOA. They were forced to demolish their shed, install a new fence, and give up a sizable portion of their property for an ugly sign. Thankfully, I won't be alive when our nearest community arrives at our property. There's a terrible HOA there, I heard, like don't park cars in your driveway. My home is in a tiny HOA neighborhood with fewer than 200 residents. I bought my first home for 3 reasons in particular. No carpet and hardwood floors. I can't help but wean my 2 cats off of carpet because the temptation to ruin it is too strong. The house uses only electricity, no gas or other fuels. There were no restrictions against solar panels in the area's HOA. Since the day I moved in, I have made sure to pay my HOA dues in full and have set up autopay to eliminate any chance of me forgetting. I make the decision to install solar panels on my roof after a year of getting settled. After receiving my quote, I asked the solar panel supplier to submit an ARC for the panel's approval. I was shocked to learn that the HOA rejected the ARC, citing aesthetic concerns. That is totally subjective, so I say that's BS and tell the solar company to install the panels. My HOA is enraged by this and has sent me a letter threatening legal action unless I remove the installation immediately. I give the management company a call to find out how I can challenge this procedure. They say I could do that at the annual meeting, which was in about a week. I go to the meeting and argue that there's a bill being pushed through the state that would make it unlawful for homeowner association to obstruct the installation of solar panels, and they agree that we should wait to take legal action until the bill passes or fails. After a week, I receive a letter in the mail from them stating that I have 1 week to get rid of them or they will take me to court and charge me for all the associated costs. Not only that, but they're pursuing me for the repairs. I took action on my fence due to my failure to obtain prior approval and the fact that the fence would also need to be taken down. I was so upset about this that I began calling every local news station about my HOA attempting to coerce me into complying, even though there were no laws prohibiting me from doing this. Later that day, I was interviewed, and the interview aired that evening on my local news station. My phone rang non-stop the following week with people wanting to offer their support and solidarity after the news story received a ton of attention. A few even asked me to run for local office. One of those individuals, let's call him Jay, was a co-author of the solar panel bill that was being considered at the state capitol. To help push the bill even further, Jay offered his complete support and arranged for me to tell my story in front of some state representatives. In order to fight my HOA, he even assisted me in finding some legal counsel. My HOA was informed by my new attorney W that we would not be backing down and that we would prefer to meet for negotiations before taking the matter to court. Let's fast forward a month or two. Holidays and inclement weather hindered a prompt turnaround for the meeting at the end of 21. Quick side note, the HOA agreed to meet, but wanted to do it at an effing Starbucks. It was clear they weren't taking this seriously and had every intention of just paying lip service before they tried to throw the book at me. Myself, my rep from the solar company, J and W, arrive at the agreed meeting place, which was the local community town center. W did not advocate gathering in a public area. The members of the HOA board arrive at their attorney. They're a group of grumpy, vengeful old Fs and made it abundantly evident that they believe this to be a time waster. They were clearly looking down on me as some young pup who needed to be put in his place. I was 29 at the time. The people genuinely waggled their finger in my direction. They also showed me and my party disrespect and belligerence during the first part of the meeting. W shot me this, let them go, they're digging their own grave kind of look. So we just sat there and listened to them babble on about their power trip and meaningless crap. Following an exhausting 20 minutes or so of the HOA droning on and on, W calmly hands them a sheet of paper that details the bill and how many state representatives have pledged to see it through to law, and stating that the HOA's actions will be deemed illegal when the State House convenes for its annual bill-passing session in a few months. Should they continue to force me to remove my panels until the bill is passed, we will pursue legal action for the time and money I lose to have the panels replaced after the bills pass. We also showed them the before and after photos of the fence along with the reasons for the repairs and the clause in the bylaws stating that an ARC is not required when doing repairs. The crusty Fs got real quiet after hearing that. After a few minutes, they were all smiles and eager to work things out. They had begun conversing in low whispers. They were aware of their mess. That concludes the tale of how I defeated my C-sucking HOA and scared the living H out of them too. I have no doubt that I have violated some bylaws for which my neighbors have also received citations. However, since the exchange, I have not seen the HOA in the slightest. I think they realized after the last showing I would not be pushed around and they're better off leaving me alone. If you want to watch the part 1, click the link here. I'm very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.